Good afternoon. I'm Danielle Conway. You're watching Life in the Law on the Think Tech Talk series. Today we're talking about immigration law, particularly current issues in U.S. immigration, challenges and options. My guests today are David McCauley and Clare Hanusz, and they are from the law firm Damon Key, Leon, Kupchak, and Hastert.
Well done.
David is a partner in Damon Key, and Clare is a returning of counsel member of the firm. So welcome back to Hawaii, Clare.
Thank you very much. Good to be back.
So you two I've identified as the best immigration lawyers I've ever known in this state, and potentially for me, on the planet.
Thank you.
You do a phenomenal job, a phenomenal service for the people of Hawaii, but as I'm going to probably communicate later in the interview, for me personally. And so thank you for being here, but thank you for also being my immigration lawyer. So we're going to talk about some really timely and heady issues today. And it all starts on the landscape of immigration in the United States. Where are we? What does it mean? And how did we get to where we are with U.S. immigration? We're also going to talk about how you got to U.S. immigration. So why don't we take the first sort of question and say, where are we in U.S. immigration? Is this a good time in the law for immigration?
We're in very, very serious need of total immigration reform. Congress is at such loggerheads, there's no sign that we're going to get it. And the only people being harmed by that are the United States of America and the people that are facing U.S. immigration law and can't get what they should have.
Clare?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's a miserable time in the state of immigration law. When President Obama was elected, he promised immigration reform within the first 100 days. And instead of that, we have more deportations under his administration than any administration prior, which is a very, very sad thing. And behind each one of those numbers is a lot of heartbreak and often a shattered family. So there's a lot that the numbers themselves are bad, but the reality behind those numbers are even worse.
Immigration, too, is not a cut and dry area of the law. This is a complex area of the law. And if you're saying that a complex area of the law is in a bad state right now, that's really telling. How can we make progress? How can we move forward? What are some of the things we need to think about in terms of moving this ball forward on immigration?
There's so much it's hard to know where to start. I mean, what you see in most of the news coverage is the plight of the 11 million, 12 million people that are here referred to as undocumented. Undocumented means they really don't have any legal papers to be in the United States and nothing that authorizes them to work. But what you don't see in the news is that the problems go way beyond that. American companies, because of our educational system, no matter how good it is, it doesn't produce the number of trained people that American companies need, especially highly trained people. Yet people can come in here from China, from India, from France, from you name it, and get their PhDs in fields where we need people. And our immigration system makes it difficult, in some cases impossible, for them to stay here so that we can benefit from what they learned in our educational system. I mean, it's at all ends, but both ends of the spectrum and everything in between. Family members waiting, years, sometimes decades, to be able to get visas that allow them to come in and join their family members who are already green card holders or U.S. citizens. I mean, the spread of problems in the immigration system is extensive.
From the first moment I met you, I said I would never, ever, ever enter a system where immigration lawyers are so needed. I would never do it by myself. I said you have to get an expert and you have to stick with that expert. How right am I about that?
I don't repair my own car. Exactly. I don't do my own taxes. That's your answer.
Exactly. And Clare?
Yeah, it's immigration to hire any kind of professional help is often expensive. That's a problem that a lot of people have. But I would recommend if people can scrape the money together, it's money well spent, because a lot of the work that David and I and other attorneys at our firm do is repairing mistakes that were done either by individuals or by other attorneys who weren't really competent in immigration law. And that not only gets more expensive, but it's a lot of heartache in the process. And so, as David said, he doesn't do his own taxes. Neither do I. I maybe could, but the chance of making a mistake is too great. And there are some things it's just better to turn over and work with a professional on.
And be assured, I'm a lawyer, and I recognize how complex and circuitous this process is.
Well, I tell people again and again that doing immigration work is 80% paperwork and 20% psychology. And the psychology is knowing how the minds of the people on the other side, the adjudicators, the people that are processing that paperwork, how they think, how they're likely to think, and it tells you what you do want in what you're filing, and it tells you what you don't want in what you're filing. And I'll see things where I'll say, wait a minute, we can't put it in there like that. We've got to change the wording, because if you word it like that, they're going to think something we don't want them to think.
Amazing. It's like getting out in front of the ball before the ball ever gets released.
And the only way you would know that is by practicing the law, by going to the conferences, by participating in the discussions that immigration attorneys have locally and nationally and even internationally. There's just no way for a layperson to know that, or someone who just dabbles in a lot of areas of the law. I think immigration law is never something that you should just dabble in. It's something that if you're hiring someone who professes to do immigration law, make sure that's really a big part of what they do. And definitely talk to other people and get recommendations. Don't just assume that, because a lot of people say that they do immigration law, but they do very little of it. And those are the people that can actually be fairly dangerous.
That's such a good lead-in. How did you get involved in doing this kind of work? I mean, you were on the award-winning international Jessup moot court team.
Number one in the world.
Number one in the world. That's what you did in law school. How did you turn suddenly to this discipline?
Well, I have a background before law school. I've had several other careers before I got to this one. But my first degree was in Chinese and Asian Studies. Then you were talking about the moot court team. That was the international law moot court team. But, I don't want to work in Washington, D.C. My wife's professor, now retired up at UH. I live here. I don't want to live somewhere else. So the closest thing that I can get to international law is probably going to be immigration law. And the way it happened, if happened is what we want to say, is I started out as a litigator, and the immigration section would use me whenever the case had to go to federal court. I had my first argument in federal court in the Ninth Circuit here in Honolulu 3 days after I got sworn in as an attorney, because it was an immigration case that I worked on during my summer clerkship.
There's no pressure at all, no pressure.
So the immigration section's using me when they've got to go into court, and I'm getting, I kind of like this. This is working for real people with real lives. You're not working for an insurance company or an association of apartment owners. I mean, these people that when you're doing immigration work, they understand what you're doing. They know why it matters to them. And so I just told the firm, I said, I don't want to do the top 5%. I want to learn all of it. And that's what we did.
And the firm said, that's
fine. They said, go for it.
That's why you're there. Excellent. And Claire, same question.
Yeah, so some similarities. Although I actually went to law school because I wanted to practice immigration law. So prior to moving to Hawaii in 1995, I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, and was working, directing a small nonprofit that was working with Central American refugees and on foreign policy issues that were the issues that were pushing Central Americans and Mexicans out of their homelands into the United States. And through doing that work, I met a lot of really fabulous immigration attorneys who took on a lot of asylum cases. And I was looking at social work at the time, and maybe I had an undergraduate degree in political science. Really liked the idea of direct services, but then when I met these immigration attorneys, I thought that's what I want to do. So we moved to Hawaii and went to law school here. and just focused on, UH doesn't have a very strong focus in immigration law at all, really. There was one course at the time, and so I was able to use my summers to go to the continent and learn immigration law there a bit, and then come back and started practicing first in legal services and then for a small firm, and then I was on my own for a long time, and then moved to Australia, and then came back and kept going with name and key. And it's an area of the law that, as David said, it combines international relations and international issues. David's interest was in Asia, mine was predominantly around Latin America, but also direct services. There's a lot of counseling and psychology and social work involved in it as well, and as well as domestic policy, foreign policy, and what we can do on a state level and what we can do on a federal level. And there was no other area of law that combined all of those things in the same package than immigration law did. And there are some days where I love what I do. There are some days I hate what I do, only because, that's maybe a little too strong, but some days where it's so frustrating because the laws we were talking about before, the laws right now are so bad and people's options are often so limited, and it can be really, really hard when there's no channel to take a really, really good person and get them and their families in a better place. We try to do everything we can. There are times where the options are just almost none.
Everything's against you.
There's a lot riding against a lot of the people at times that we're working with, and that can be that's why I say I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with immigration law. The best days are the days that we can take a client and again, get them and their families where they want to be, and that's a fabulous feeling. But it's also a really low feeling when you're in the detention center meeting with someone and you're explaining to them that you can't do anything, that they don't have any options, and then you have to leave the detention center and call their spouse, who might be a U.S. citizen with a couple U.S. citizen kids, and explain to that person why her husband's going to have to leave, and knowing the path, the long years of separation that they're going to face, and even, that journey can be difficult.
Even though you say that, Claire, I do want to put a pitch in for your law firm, Damon Key, because of all the law firms doing this high caliber work, you are actually very accessible in terms of cost, in terms of reasonable cost and price. And so I think it's important, even though we say that these sometimes are difficult times, there is excellent representation out there at a price that is affordable.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And we take, we take a lot of calls where we'll give kind of very simple consultations, and we do that a lot. And for a lot of people, that's all they need, is just to talk to someone, have a few simple questions answered, and then they can go on their way and make their decision about what they want to do. So that's a community service role that we can play as well.
Yeah, our Yellow Page ad actually says free telephone consultation.
And that is true.
Yeah, and we can't give people legal advice, but it's such a hard system to understand that if they call in, they've got a question about something, I try to, take 5 or 10 minutes to explain, no, it works like this, it works like that. And so that at least, whether they hire us to do any work or not, they've got the right information, because there is so much information out there that is totally wrong. I mean, I will tell people, even if you call the immigration customer service number or you go down to the Honolulu office and you ask the people at the window a question, the answer you're going to get is either going to be partially wrong or completely wrong, because they haven't studied immigration law. The people that are answering the phone at the customer service center are outside contractors.
Yes. Yes.
So,
and they're not keeping up with the law.
No.
As you mentioned early on in the segment, it's changing. And sometimes, or most times, it feels like it's changing for the worse. But it's changing, and who's going to keep track of that?
yeah, we get 2 or 3 information feeds coming in all day long, every day, that are, here's the new article, here's the new case that just came out, here's what CIS or ICE has decided they're going to do, here's their new policy.
Right.
It's, you've got to keep on top of it.
It's a lot to keep up with.
So we have tons to talk about. We have to take a break, but I want the viewers to know that we are on Twitter, and our Twitter address is ThinkTechHigh. And if you have questions or comments, we welcome them. This is going to be a very exciting program today, but we're going to take a break and come back to you with Life in the Law. I'm Danielle Conway with my guest David McCauley and Clare Hanusz. We're back. I'm Danielle Conway. My guests are David McCauley and Clare Hanusz from the law firm of Damon, Key, Leon, Kupchak, Hastert.
Got it.
They are immigration lawyers here in Honolulu. We are so very, very grateful that you're taking time with us today to talk about this important topic. Now, you mentioned something to me off air that I just have to repeat, and if I get it wrong, correct me. You mentioned that in the Obama administration, we have deported more people under his administration than in any other presidential administration. Did I get that correct?
That is correct. They're averaging 400,000 per year, so now he's approaching the end of his 5th year. By then it will be 2 million people.
How can that be tolerated?
Well, look, people have gone to extraordinary lengths to try to stop this and bring attention to it. There have been hunger strikes in front of the White House that went on for weeks. There have been petitions and phone call drives, campaigns to stop the deportations. The deportation machine just keeps rolling right along. I don't know how many people have been arrested, put themselves at sacrifice out in front of the White House to try to bring light to this issue. I don't know. We keep trying to stop it.
And it's not a White House issue. This is a Hawaii issue. We actually are engaging in this. You told me in Maui.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean throughout the state, there are every week you can go to the immigration court and see and hear the stories of the people who are caught up in the deportation system. And absolutely, a percentage of those people have committed crimes, some of them pretty serious crimes. But the vast majority of the people who end up in removal proceedings have committed no crime whatsoever. And a lot of them have been in the United States for a really, really long time. A lot of them have U.S. citizen spouses and children and parents, and are really just kind of at the wrong place at the wrong time, and they come under the radar of immigration enforcement and then find themselves caught up in a really ugly, tangled web.
So it could actually be as typical and as pedantic as being stopped in a car and not having a driver's license.
Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about how that happens to people?
Claire, you know more about it.
It's true. We've practiced immigration law, probably especially removal defense, anywhere in the United States. You've heard stories of, and had clients who ended up in removal proceedings and sometimes ended up being deported because they got stopped at for a stop sign violation or a failure to put on a turn signal or a light that went out on the back of the car, right? They get pulled over just as any of us would. The problem is most of these people don't have access to driver's licenses, so they don't have driver's licenses, which also prevents them from getting auto insurance. And then where David or I or you, Danielle, get stopped, show your driver's license, you show your proof. Maybe you'll get a ticket. You probably just get a friendly warning, right? Okay, next time be more careful, whatever. Or you get the ticket, you pay the ticket. Done, right? Well, if you don't have that driver's license that prevents you from having the insurance, the questions keep coming, right? And if you don't have any identification whatsoever, they're going to call Immigration and Customs Enforcement more often than not. And that's going to put you in, get a free ticket from Maui over to Honolulu, a couple of weeks at the Federal Detention Center right next to the airport, a date with the immigration judge, and it might get you actually removed from the country depending on what your circumstances are. So one of the things that we're working on locally is trying to provide some fixes for these things that aren't getting addressed at the national level. And so while immigration law is federal law, and our state legislators don't have much control over that, what we can do is try to make Hawaii a little kinder and gentler for the immigrants in our community. So along with the Hawaii Coalition for Immigration Reform, which is part of FACE, Faith Action for Community Equity, there's a group of us who are working on trying to get driver's licenses available for everyone in the state of Hawaii who is trained, tested, and licensed. And so, and 12 other states across the U.S. provide driver's licenses now for people regardless of their immigration status, and we hope that Hawaii can become one of those states. And that will just keep a few people, even if it's only one or two,
It's
out
still
of
one
the
or two.
deportation web. And if it keeps daddy or mommy home with a family, it's worth it.
And David, you're doing things at the national level to try to bring more attention to undocumented as well as legal holders of visas.
Well, I've posed it to some members of Congress. They don't seem to listen or do anything about it. But the last time we had a legalization program, the law was passed, I think in 1986, maybe it was 1988. And in order to qualify for that legalization program, you had to be able to prove that you were in the country illegally in order to qualify. Well, and people raised, I mean, the law went through, but people raised a great hue and cry about this being an amnesty. And so now here we are with comprehensive immigration reform, trying to come up with some way to, the phrase they keep using is a path to citizenship, which is for the 11 million undocumented. They're repeating the same mistake that was made back then. And that is, the opposition to that, the biggest chorus of opposition is going to say, that's amnesty, that's an amnesty. Well, if it's only for people that are illegal, that is an amnesty. So what I'm trying to get people to think about in Congress is make a set of rules. Your Congress, you make whatever you want the rules to be. A set of requirements that if you've been in the United States for X number of years, you've paid your taxes for X number of years, you've mastered the English language to such and such a degree. And if you have those qualifications, then you're eligible to apply for a green card or whatever status they want to make it. It's not going to be you're eligible to apply for citizenship, so that's kind of misstated. But you're eligible to apply for a green card. You'll still have to show that you don't have a criminal record and all the other stuff that everybody else has to show in order to get their green cards, but you'd be eligible. You'd be eligible if you were here on a student visa or a visiting professor at the university. There's no clear pathway for you to get to a green card or citizenship. You'd have it, the ones I think of the most are what are called E2 treaty investors. The U.S. has treaties with 60 or 70 other countries that allow us to go and do business there, allow them to come and do business here, and the visa's an E2 treaty investor visa. Those people are coming in. They're either buying U.S. businesses or they're setting up new businesses. They're spending $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. This is not the $1 million green card program that everybody has heard about. And they're creating businesses. They're running the businesses. They're hiring Americans. There's no path to citizenship for them.
Right.
Well, if everybody who had those qualifications, here X number of years, pay your taxes so many years, master the English language, and whatever else Congress wants to put on there, is eligible to apply, that's not an amnesty. You don't have to be illegal to get it. And it would resolve a lot of the horrendous waiting times that we have for professional people to get their green cards.
That's right.
I mean, employers may sometimes have to wait, 3 years, 6 years, 8 years. What employer wants to wait that long to hire somebody when they've got a position they need filled now?
That's right. And that brings up a point about what other states are trying to do to get people into their population. So you got Michigan,
Specifically
Governor
Detroit.
trying to get 50,000 people from abroad into the state of Michigan, like you said, Detroit.
It's affordable housing.
But also to spur growth and job development.
I don't even know what the percentage is. It's very, very high. The number of new businesses started by non-American entrepreneurs. That's one of the things they do. They come in here, they get their green cards or whatever the status is they get. They start a business and they build that business. I mean, they came here because they wanted to live the American dream. Well, that's part of the American dream, and they jump right on it.
Correct.
More so than we do.
Exactly.
And there are also cities that have that have marketed themselves as being very kind of immigrant friendly, kind of regardless of your status. You come, you contribute. We want you. I think Dayton, Ohio, is one, and it has really helped the economic revitalization of that town by having, because people know that they are welcomed there, and that they will be, supported and safe, and they become wonderful members of the community. I mean, the kind of neighbors that we would all want to have,
The
right?
problem is
Yeah.
that the states cannot enact immigration laws.
Right.
That's the problem.
They've got to get the federal government to do it.
But where are the communities most deserving and most in need? They're in need at the state level, not at the federal.
Right,
It's
right.
not the same need
Right.
at the federal level. And so there is this rock and a hard place argument that those who have money to invest are welcome to invest, but you're not welcome to get a green card.
Right.
Well, there is the so-called EB-5 program for people who are willing to put in $1 million, or in regional centers $500,000. They're generally going into limited partnership kind of investments.
Sure.
And there are 3 or 4 big entities running those things. But that's buying a green card
Yes.
when you come right down to it.
Literally.
And because the people aren't making money off of this investment.
Yes.
This investment might pay 1%, 2%, 3%.
Right.
The E2 people, they're coming in and they're running businesses because they want to generate income. And so, but the problem with the EB-5 program for the $1 million, $500,000 investments is that's saying, well, if you're rich,
Come on.
come on in.
Right, right.
Right. So how do we face this rhetoric that we always hear about then immigrants who come in and they drain our system?
Totally untrue.
Okay.
There have been studies over the last 15, 20 years that demonstrate that they put into the economy 3 to 4 to 5 times what they take out of the economy in terms of health benefits, education benefits, that sort of thing. Years ago, I was doing research, and I don't even recall how I got into it. But you'll have people here, and they'll buy a Social Security card, and they'll buy a fake ID, and they'll use that to get a job. Well, we all know that every month you get your paycheck, and money is withheld for Social Security.
Right.
That happens to all of us. The people that are here illegally, they can't get that money out. They can't claim their Social Security benefits later because they don't really have a real Social Security card that's for them. So they can't get that money out. And that money goes into what's called a Social Security suspense fund. When I was looking into this, and this was 10 years ago or more, and I don't even remember why I was looking into it, but what I found was, we're worried about our Social Security going bankrupt.
That's right.
10 years ago, that suspense fund had, if I'm remembering correctly, $260 billion.
We're saying B with billion.
B with
Yes.
a billion. So here
So
we are
it's the
10 years.
undocumented population that's propping up
Yeah,
our Social
yeah, they're
Security
propping up our-
system. Well, we need them for that,
Right. Thank you so much for your contribution
Right.
and for your service.
And talking about drains on society and drains on community. Look, the drains on society come when your dad gets deported,
That's right.
and the family is thrown into utter chaos. I mean, those are the drains on society. There are so many mixed status families in our communities, meaning you'll have one person with papers, one person without papers. There's a really common myth that once you marry a U.S. citizen, well, some people think you get automatic citizenship, some people think you get an automatic green card. And the reality is, under immigration law, there's nothing automatic. It's all a process.
Yes.
There are filing fees, there's a ton of paper, and it's a lot of work.
Yes.
But the other issue is that, say, if you enter the United States without inspection, and say you've been here 10 or 15 years, even if you've married a U.S. citizen and you have a couple of beautiful U.S. citizen children and you're doing everything right, there is no way for you to get permanent residency and stay in the United States while you do that process. So there is no...
There's no automatic.
You have a lot of talk about this line and people trying to jump the line. And what we keep saying is that, for a lot of people, there's no line. There's no, so they have to, they have to make their own. They have to make their own way. And there's a real need for empathy. And to try to stand in the shoes. If you really look at the stories of the people who've made a really dangerous and really courageous, in my opinion, journey to try to make a better life for them and their family. If you can just try to imagine what it would be like to put yourself in their shoes. I think you're going to feel a whole lot different about those people.
Let's pick this up
less
after
us
the
and
break
them.
and talk about exactly what these individuals have to go through and how you assist them in the technical maze that is the immigration law. I'm Danielle Conway. This is Life in the Law. I'm here with David McCauley and Clare Hanusz from Damon Key. We're talking about immigration in the United States. We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Horry for ThinkTech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
Welcome back. I'm Danielle Conway. You're watching Life in the Law. My guests are David McCauley and Clare Hanusz from the law firm Damon Key, Leon, Kupchak, and Hastert. They are immigration lawyers in town, and we've been talking about the policy in our immigration law system. And I want to link policy to the technical maze that is the immigration law system. So we left off the last segment talking about the harm that is pressed upon society by deporting family members who should be able to access the immigration system and receive some type of relief and some type of process. So let's get back to that, and let's talk about, you said something about jumping the line. People always think there's this jumping the line.
My family member had to wait for 10 years, and why should this person get this kind of benefit? And to get into the United States, to get permanent residency status, there are only really generally two ways of doing that: through employment or through a family member filing a petition for you. And if you don't have either one of those avenues available to you, and if you're in a situation where you can't feed your family, or you have a sick parent who can't afford the medication that they need, and I'm talking predominantly about the southern U.S. border between the United States and Mexico and the countries south of Mexico, because that's where a fair amount of the immigration debate, the people that we're talking about, that's where they're coming from. People will make really difficult decisions to, again, get a better life, and we have to remember that a lot of the territory that they're crossing into was their territory initially. A large part of the United States was So families were separated way back when. That was Mexico, way back when, and so. Until there's that, one of the larger things that I try to work on, there's no easy answers, but working on trying to better the conditions in the countries where people are leaving. Ideally, everybody could stay where they're born, if that's what they wanted to, right? And that's what a lot of the people we work with. I'm not talking about the employment based or the highly trained professionals, but the other folks would love to stay where they were born, but oftentimes for different reasons they can't, right? And so. For those people, again, there's no line for them to be in, and there was. David,
can I interrupt, because I really want to address this fallacy, in essence, that there is this one single line. And can you talk a little bit about why that is not so? Are there policy reasons that, for example, we put more priority on bringing in family members as opposed to, say, bringing in direct family members as opposed to bringing a cousin, or what are the reasons that we have a hierarchy of application?
You want to try to speak to that?
Well, the part of the reason back in 1952, when the basis for our current immigration law was drafted, one of the key concerns was family unity, and so you had a lot of favoritism, preferences. They have preference categories and higher priorities to family members. There's two sets of preference categories, one for family members and one that's employment based. I think nowadays there's more feeling in Congress that we should make the employment-based a little easier to get because we need them, and maybe we put too much emphasis on the family members. But even with family members, some of them can be in a really long waiting line. Brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens, they're going to be on a waiting list that's, for most countries, going to be 12 years long. If they're from the Philippines, it's as much as 22 years long. So you're waiting 22 years from the time your brother filed paperwork for you until you can get an immigrant visa. On the other hand, in the employment-based side, there's a category called, the employment ones are all EBs. There's an EB1, and EB1 includes multinational executives. So like if Sony Corporation wants to bring in a vice president to work over here, no waiting list for you guys. Outstanding professors and researchers. So if you can really show that you've got a national and international record in your field, then okay, you can come in under the EB1, no waiting period for you. And the other one, which I like and I've had a few of them in the EB1, is aliens of extraordinary ability.
Interesting.
And that's people who are at the top of their field. And you've got to be able to show that you've got one very prestigious award, and the example they give is the Nobel Prize. You got the Nobel Prize? We'll take it.
But we really know that's for soccer players. What's the guy's name?
Pele. We could have gotten it for Pele back in the day,
But the one with the really high-profile wife, I can't remember her name. Beckham. David
Beckham.
Yeah.
No problem. No problem.
So he's not going to wait.
No, he's not going to wait.
But there are reasons, and there are determinations in Congress about what's the policy for preferring one group over another. So it shouldn't be this thing where we say, oh, someone has intervened in the line and butted in front of someone else. This is a condition of policy.
There's no way to butt in line, unless they create a brand new line.
Right.
You're not in any of these other 10 lines. You can be in this line. There's no way. I mean, I have people ask me that all the time. Is there any way we can make this happen faster? No. There's all these other people in line ahead of you. You don't get to jump to the front. Unless you're David Beckham.
That's right.
You start at the front.
Now, you were mentioning some wonderful provision that used to exist.
This is the example of how badly Congress can screw things up. There was a provision in the law, and it was there for years. It was called Section 245I. And, Clare was saying earlier, if you're here in the country and you've got no papers, even if you're married to an American and you've got 2 or 3 U.S. citizen kids, because you got no papers to show how you came in, you can't process for a green card. Well, with 245I, that kind of thing, if you were married to an American, it would be forgiven. Even some of the other categories, that would be forgiven. And you wouldn't have to go back to your home country, but you had to pay a penalty fee of $1,000. Everybody was happy to pay the $1,000. It would cost me more than that to fly back home and process for a visa over there.
That's correct.
Nowadays, if you've been in the country illegally long enough, and you fly back home to process for a visa over there, you've got to wait 10 years before you come back in, so that's really not a good option. So it was a good deal in terms of being able to stay here with your family. It was cheaper than having to fly back home to process, and the Immigration Service was raking in millions and millions of dollars.
On the penalty.
And the Immigration Service is not funded by taxpayer money. They're funded by the money they collect. So this was a win-win-win for everybody, including the old INS. And Congress, in its infinite wisdom, we better take that away.
Stopped it.
Sunset. There was a sunset date.
And it ended. And they didn't renew it.
I'm more than disappointed, but I'm not shocked.
Well, I mean, and it's something that advocates of immigration reform have been working to bring back since its sunset, and it's been just extraordinarily frustrating after we had President Obama make this promise the first 100 days, and there was this window of opportunity where something could have gotten done, and now Congress is in such a gridlock that people have been waiting year after year, hoping and dreaming of immigration reform, and you know what? I don't think it's going to happen this year.
Boehner says it's a non-starter. He said that just a few days ago.
And so I don't. How much longer are people going to have to, stay in the shadows, living in fear, families facing separation, a daily basis.
Well, when we come back, let's talk a little bit about the Deferred Action Childhood Arrival Program, and we will talk also about some options for advocacy to try to resolve some of these very deep-rooted issues. I'm Danielle Conway. You're watching Life in the Law in the Think Tech Talk series.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
I'm Danielle Conway. You're watching Life in the Law. My guests are David McCauley and Clare Hanusz from the Damon Key Law Firm, and we're talking about U.S. immigration law challenges and options. So I wanted to come back and ask you briefly about the Deferred Action for Children or Childhood Program. Give me the right name for this.
Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals.
Arrivals. So is this a stopgap? Was this supposed to be something that it's not? Has it fizzled out? Or is it providing any relief for children who are caught up in an undocumented status?
Better than nothing.
Better than nothing.
It's better than nothing. It's not like there were a group of people who pushed a long time for something called the DREAM Act, and that was a way that was recognizing that a lot of the people who were caught up in the immigration system were people who were brought to the United States as children from other countries and either brought in without papers or came into the United States and their parents overstayed visas and they grew up here. They were as American as I am born in Ohio, right? And this was their country. This was all they knew, but they had no status, and they had no. Again, like we were talking about the line, right? For these people, there was no line. There's nothing they can. They weren't born here. They were born elsewhere, but they came to the United States as children. They were educated in the United States. Some of them didn't even realize that they were not U.S. citizens until they went to get a driver's license, and they realized that they didn't have the proper documentation for that. Parents didn't necessarily tell the kids the whole truth about where they were born, but the United States was all they knew. So the DREAM Act was a way of coming up with the legal status for these kids, recognizing that this is where they grew up, this is where, for them, this is where they belong. DREAM Act failed, unfortunately, in Congress. Again, going back to the tension between the Democrats and the Republicans, and they couldn't agree on it. So Obama came up with this plan for deferred action for childhood arrivals, which basically, for people who came into the United States at, I can't even remember,
you had before you were 15, 15
before
or 16.
They were 15, you have to be able
over 15, 16
you have
now.
to be able to document all of that. There are certain provisions for eligibility for DACA, but if you meet that, you can get a temporary employment authorization card. So you're still in complete legal limbo. It's not a path to a green card. It's not a path
to go to school. Are you able to go to college with this program?
Yeah. I mean, undocumented kids can generally go to college. The problem is they often don't qualify for financial aid. And of course, college is really, really expensive. Now, one of the great things, we were talking earlier about some local fixes that have been done. One of the fabulous things that the UH Board of Regents did, and there were a lot of really great people who at UH and in the community who worked on this, is now undocumented students can go to UH and get in-state tuition.
Okay.
Which is huge, because there's this whole class of people who really wanted an education and they were completely priced out of it. And so now it gives them that option. Again, there are certain things that they have to show, right? So that's DACA. And I mean, DACA is better than nothing for these people. It lets them come out of the shadows. It lets them get their driver's licenses.
Sure.
It gives them some kind of identification. It helps.
But it doesn't fix the root problem.
No, it doesn't fix the root problem at all. And they're still very much living in legal limbo, right? Which.
And then they would have to go back to a place, as you said, that they don't even know.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's unclear how long that program is going to be extended for.
Right.
So it's not an indefinite limbo. It could, if a new administration decides to take that away, they can take away.
And it hasn't been used as much as it could be. I think they said there were 1.8 million people that could qualify.
Right.
And the total number is somewhere up around 400,000 or more. And I think a lot of it is fear that, if I come out, you're going to start looking for my parents.
Exactly. Exactly.
Which they said they wouldn't do, and which it appears they have not done.
Right.
But there's no telling.
But there's a lot of fear, of course, in that kind of exposure. I know we've been talking about a lot of the downers in around immigration law, and there are plenty of them. But there are some things that have been done in the last 10 years or so that are kind of bright lights. There are pretty good protections for victims of domestic violence now who might be undocumented or married to, but are married to a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. Protections for human trafficking victims are much better now than they were a decade ago. And there's a visa called a U visa, which provides temporary legal status to undocumented victims of crime who come forward to testify, because that was a huge problem where you would have, say, a domestic violence victim or a rape victim or someone who had been assaulted not want to report that problem to police because they feared deportation for them and their families. And so, I mean, that's not good for anyone. So with this new visa, if someone does come forward, reports the crime, cooperates with the investigation, regardless of where that investigation goes, but there's a temporary protection for that person, which is great. So we need to look at, the little nuggets of good amongst the piles of bad.
And I will follow your lead and say the reason why I asked you to be on the show was because I have been a beneficiary of the great work of your law firm at Damon Key, because David McCauley is our immigration lawyer, and he was able to get my now husband here from Ghana, West Africa, via London. So thank you so much for that, David. And it's such a feel-good story. I often tell people, if it wasn't for David, I would not have my son.
You should bring out a picture of your son, and just so that there's no
let me tell you another
lingering
story, because
questions.
people sometimes ask me why I do immigration law. Now,
Yes.
I studied foreign languages. I've lived in a lot of countries. I know that if you're in Japan and you ask a question, you're going to get a Japanese answer because they're all from Japan. If you're in France, you're going to get a French answer because they're all French. When you're in Holland, you're going to get a Dutch answer because they're all Dutch. In this country, if you raise a question or an issue, you're going to get 100 different kinds of answers because we have people here from everywhere. And that's one of the things that makes this such a great country. And every time I bring in one more, like your husband, this country gets a little bit better.
And it's much better for me now than it was without him. And let me say, and let me end this program with the fact that, again, your law firm does a phenomenal job of providing high-end, sophisticated immigration law service on a fantastically affordable price. So I wanted to thank you for doing that for our community, but also for doing that for our nation. This is big stuff. So I want to repeat the law firm again for those who might be watching. If you have an immigration issue that you need to talk to an expert about, you need to call David McCauley or Clare Hanusz at Damon Key, Leon, Kupchak, and Hastert. They know what they are doing. I'm Danielle Conway. This is Life in the Law. Thank you so much for watching this program, and I hope that my guests will come back again because there's so much more to talk about.